Good morning.
Good morning. Happy New Year, everyone.
Indeed, Happy New Year.
I put the link to the agenda in the chat, Alex.
Awesome.
If there's anything anyone wants to add, please feel free to add it as well.
So I guess we'll just give it a couple more minutes and start.
Should we get going, Alex? I think we're
Yes.
gonna have. Okay.
Let's do it.
Hmm?
Do you want to start with the first topic?
Sure. So last night, or very early this morning, there was an issue opened in the TOC that's about this, I'm going to call it transparency model, that it has a rather funny title to the issue. Change the world for the better. TOC operations transparency, open, fair, no kingmakers, lobbying, conflict of interest, etc. And the issue's quite well described. I am curious if moving forward, since I feel like some of the initial TOC process and responsibilities are being moved to the SIGs, that it would be in our best interest to probably weigh in on this issue. And then furthermore, identify what we feel like is important to have as SIG leads and as tech leads. I think that we don't have a very good, like, oh, I want to be a SIG storage lead. Well, what does that mean? What is my time commitment? What are the responsibilities? Oh, I'm a tech lead. What's expected of me? How much time should I be spending on that? Or what is my contribution? Now, I don't know that we can quantify it into hours or anything, but I don't think we have a good succinct list. So when people sign up or commit themselves to this, what the expectations of that commitment is. And then furthermore, I know the TOC suffered immensely over the years. And I don't know if they suffered as much as maybe some projects with kind of this backdoor communique to the TOC, where I know, at least I can speak from a Red Hat standpoint personally, we would have a project presented on the TOC, we'd have no supporters. It would get kind of kicked to the side, which is fine. And then, someone would present right after us and they'd say, oh, and we already have 2 TOC sponsors, and, and then they're in sandbox. So I just want to make sure that people looking from the outside in, especially new to CNCF and the TOC, feel like it's fair, because I think everyone does want it to be fair. And I want to possibly have a way that we don't run into those same issues, because then it'll just be history repeating itself if we have projects coming to us on the side and trying to get support before the fact. So that's all. I just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention, have people weigh in, because I have definitely heard frustrations from the wider community around these issues, and it's better just to talk about them in the open and figure out what we want to do from a storage. That's all we can control, what we can do from the storage SIG to prevent things like this happening. So that's my 2 cents. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to look at this or thinks we should do anything about it. I'd just love to hear some feedback.
So,
you want to summarize sorry, because this is
go
very
on.
long. I just look at this so long. So I don't know if someone can summarize in like a few points, the main point of this. Otherwise, I can read through this.
It's the issue somewhere on the list. It's on the.
The summarization, Zhang, is that they want to make sure that, first of all, people aren't able to lobby TOC members, to be able to get their support ahead of time, and there's no conflict of interest in people sponsoring something, that it's not going to benefit, their company directly because they're sponsoring it, that there's a timeline. And I've said this many times on the TOC calls. I don't know if people have had that. There's no time boxing today, and there's no clear reason why perhaps projects are rejected. And I think people sometimes get in the queue and they feel like, what's going on? I don't know what I should be doing. I've answered all the questions. And so I think there's definitely some frustration from a lot of projects I've heard. So I think the idea is we can't have conflict of interest. That's not fair. We need to be able to have a way that we're open and honest with projects that come to us and say why, it was rejected, and there's a certain criteria that they're following to do that. And then,
yeah, I think this issue is kind of interesting, but it does kind of conflate a number of different issues into one thing, which probably isn't the most helpful thing in the world. I think we've had this discussion with a talk, and my personal opinion is yes, the process needs to be transparent, and the workflow that is being put into place should hopefully clarify some of these problems and stop them from happening in the first place.
Mhm.
I think historically there have been some question marks with being able to provide negative information or negative feedback. I think that's probably the biggest challenge, right? I think in most of the cases it's not because there has been, the talk we're trying to be unfair in terms of dealing with a particular project, but I think it's more a case of, there was some sort of problem which there wasn't a kind of private way of clarifying what that problem was without kind of making it a really big deal. And I think, sometimes that meant that things were kind of maybe ignored, as opposed to trying to sort of take what might have been a harder problem. So hopefully the workflow means that a lot of this stuff becomes a lot more automated, and this process gets followed. Just on that, I see that we have the ongoing revamp of the sandbox process. Is there any specific update you want to cover on from there too?
The only update is that I think in order to help facilitate making that happen more quickly, Amy created yesterday the SIG chairs. And so I think the idea is that we can, collaborate in that in order to get an agreed upon template process. I know we published kind of a sandbox template. SIG app delivery did as well. Theirs is really exhaustive. It's more than what I came up with, or it's a good kind of mix of the both. So I think the idea is that we can more quickly iterate on that as we move forward. And so let me paste in their document as well, because I think it's really good.
Amy, if you're around,
Yes.
do you know what the sort of current status for that process discussion is? Is this to be raised at a talk call specifically, or do we need to have a separate call to
This
cover
is on
off?
the agenda for a separate call, and the only reason that I haven't put that one out yet is simply because looking at everybody's schedules for the next week. So
Okay.
yes, so that one is coming. And yes, we are working on being able to have, I think, better communication between all of the SIG chairs about like what's currently in flight is also something that I'm looking to be able to do. So yeah, watch the Slack channel, and we'll be working on this.
All right. That's cool.
Yeah.
Anything
So-
else for me?
Is it worth saying, I'm not sure everyone knows, Alex, we had a talk with the SIG chairs at KubeCon in San Diego, kind of about, how we better define the process, just so everyone knows, there's nothing funny going on. It's just that we wanted to all come together and kind of say, what is the process of the SIGs? They're still new. How should that work? So that's what conversation and follow-up meeting we're talking about. Just wanted to give some context.
Yeah, so just for context, I think most of you are already aware of this, but we had a meeting between some members of the talk and some of the talk chairs to kind of cover off what's working, what isn't working, where we think there are things which we can do better, and part of the discussion was around formalizing some of the processes, because while each SIG has their own charter, and SIG activity has been pretty good and productive. In general, the way we interact with the TOC and do things like project reviews and things like that wasn't a particularly well formalized process, and sometimes things were going askew. For example, when a project might talk to the TOC directly before coming to the SIG, or talk to the SIG and then have a talk presentation before the SIG have had time to put in feedback. Those kind of basic things which are kind of slipping through the net. So we're hoping to have that formalized process coming out soon, which all the documents are actually within the meeting minutes if you want to have a look at them, and they're listed in the doc updates presentations that happened yesterday as well. Okay, should we move on to the next thing, or was there anything else we wanted to cover there?
Go ahead.
I'd like to add something about the issue, and I'm trying to make sure I say this as nice as I can. So, if you know, I've been participating in this team for a while. I've been participating in the what it was called before, the work group before in CNCF, and myself and others in the community have always brought this up. I brought this up myself at the TLC meetings for the past almost a year ago, and kingmaking specifically. I remember way back in QCon Austin that the stickers were everywhere for projects or the CNCF saying we chose these, and I brought that up also at the time to stop doing that. Because that shows to the community, those that are not part of the community, says, oh, these are the projects I should be paying attention to. I shouldn't be paying attention to anything else, right? That kills open source, that kills innovation. And I've always thought that we play a funny role in CNCF when we allow project. I still don't understand like the whole, personally, I still don't understand why just the projects want to be part of CNCF. And sometimes I feel like they want to be part of it because they see the history of other projects that have been made kings. All right. And they say, oh, I want to be like that. Right. I want to do that. I want what they have. I want the marketing that they have. And I think that's what we get, this rush of projects saying, I want to be part of the CNCF because I see what those projects have and I want to have that. Right. And I think that's to me personally, I don't know if others agree, that's one of the biggest issues that the CNCF has. It's like, what does it mean to be a CNCF project? And I think we have, today we have these examples, and what it means is that they're kings. That's what it means. And we just have to be realistic. And so when other projects want to come in, they're saying, that's what I want. I want the CNCF to give me the marketing that I need. So for example, when you go for a project, for a CFP, and since I don't know how long now, but like there's a lot of projects that you could to choose your CFPs participate of projects in the CNCF, right? It's in the CFP tool itself, right? It has polluted that, in my opinion. Where now you can say, oh, if you're a CFP person, going through, you see CNCF projects there now. I said, oh, I want my project to be in the CNCF page for people to pick, right? And then the CNCF projects themselves get talks easily in QCon, right? So there's another reason why I want my project to be part of it. I think we have, not we as a CNCF, myself included, CNCF member, have created this this weird situation, right, where we give these projects privileges, right, and marketing, and that's what pulls in projects to wanting to be part of CNCF, in my opinion. And in my other opinion is that in sandboxing, I would pull everything in the sandbox. It's like, you want to be a project? Sure, what the heck? Be a sandbox project. Now, if you want to go from sandbox to incubation, we should have a process. It's like, but if you want to be a sandbox project, sure, just come in. We're open, right? And we should let everybody in if they want to be part of it. But to go into incubation, we should be more strict because it's a graduation, right? But to me, the bar of the sandbox was always supposed to be low. It's like, you just want to be part of it. Everybody's like, yeah, okay, let's see what happens. So anyway, that's just my opinion. I hope that I have expressed it correctly and politically correct.
Okay.
Well,
watch me. I'm putting my diplomatic hat on.
Yeah, exactly.
So look, again, right, I think there are a few things that you mentioned there, so I'm just going to try and go through a couple of those things. So ultimately, the CNCF is a marketing organization, and it provides support, both marketing and technical and financial and whatever, right, to the projects which are incubating and graduated. The sandbox projects are there to sort of foster that community, and then hopefully some of those sandbox projects move into incubating. And I agree with you that that move from sandbox to incubating does need to be fairly strict. And to be fair, the criteria for incubating and graduation are fairly well defined, and they're not easy or automatic to achieve. In the past, there have probably been, we should probably be okay to admit that in the past there have been some cases where a sandbox project got an undue amount of attention. It got marketing or mentions in keynotes and things like that when it shouldn't have. And I think the CNCF has been okay to recognize that fact and has tried to course correct when that has happened. But some unfortunate mistakes have happened, unfortunately, and that's something we learn from. The point though is that the CNCF is there to make the projects which are incubating and graduating successful. That's the whole point of the CNCF. So yes, they should get prominence at KubeCon, and yes, they should get talks, and they should get stickers, and they should get marketing, because that's the whole point of the CNCF, and that's what we signed up for. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. That at the end of the day, we're trying to say these, the CNCF was meant to go out and say what projects are best suited for cloud native environments, and for you to build your cloud native environments, and match the criteria and the charter for cloud native applications, etc. And these are the things that we're helping, and these are the things that we're financing, and these are the things that we're marketing. And I think that's okay. And when it comes to the no kingmakers thing, right? I kind of I interpret that slightly differently. I interpret that in terms of, hey, if we're not necessarily, I don't think the CNCF's role is to say this should be a CNCF project or this shouldn't be a CNCF project, and the kingmaking applies to that kind of functionality, right? I think a lot of the kingmaking criteria also deals with, if there are multiple CNCF projects that deal with the same technology, we're not here to say this project is better than that project. So if there are multiple CNI providers, if there are multiple serverless providers, if there are multiple, I don't know, logging providers, we're not here to say this logging provider is better than that logging provider. We're not here to say Tanos is better than Prometheus or Linkerd is better than whatever. Every CNCF project has to be treated equally. But I think it is actually okay to say these projects meet the criteria of the CNCF, and these projects are good for cloud native, and therefore they deserve to be a CNCF project. I think that's just par for the course of what we're trying to do here, right?
Yeah, the other thing we should look at is the economy behind all this, right? Eventually, CNCF is an organization, and as an organization has to succeed, which means that the projects that CNCF takes, the motivation behind them is that they should eventually drive sponsorship to the organization. So that is something that, I mean, for it to be, these things have to be win-win-win for things to work well, right? If a decision causes, eventually, if there's a decision that contradicts the intent for CNCF to be able to attract money, then that may not be necessarily a good decision per se. Kind of like, I mean, why would the CNCF be motivated to exist? Otherwise, if they, it's important that eventually all of this results in money being raised, right, for the organization.
Right, and that money being used to fund the projects ultimately.
Exactly, yeah. So I think marketing is inevitable if you look at it from that perspective. So you have to be able to promote these projects, and so I'm kind of adding to what Alex is saying. That
Yeah, I hear you guys, and I'm not disagreeing with that. I just think that wherever you have money and marketing, you will always have these issues that are raised in the TOC.
I
that,
don't agree.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think all I'm asking is that there's a certain degree of frustration, and I'm glad that people have aired that diplomatically here, so I appreciate that. But the point of putting this in here was, if we become the first, it's the SIG, storage SIG, the first line of attack, or whatever that's the wrong word to use, but if people are coming to us first, let's set that bar to where we feel comfortable with it, where we have, a certain level of fairness. We have well-defined processes going forward. I think we have an opportunity here to be able to say, okay, we don't really feel like that worked great in the past. What can we do better? So that's the whole point. Is I want to make sure from a storage SIG, we're seen as being fair, and we are fair, and we know what criteria we're judging against, and we're all on the same page. And then secondly, what can we do to help the TOC and the wider CNCF community also be seen as fair and unbiased, and that the process is, the same for everyone, and that everyone's getting what they want out of it. And that it's clear, because that actually, someone asked me that yesterday, what is the benefit of being in the CNCF? And we should be able to all answer that the exact same way. So that was my point. And
definitely transparency and fairness don't disagree with any of these perspectives. So that's definitely a good thing.
So, you know what? I'm actually up for this. So, I think there are two aspects to this. There's the transparency, which I think can be addressed through the workflow and making the workflow process public. And then there is the fairness side of things, where I think we can, we can put a bunch of guidelines together, right? So, we can make clear criteria, but I think those criteria are actually documented, but maybe not made clear enough. But I think we can also, add to that and strengthen them by saying things like, for example, there shouldn't be conflicts of interest, and tech leads that review a project shouldn't have have a conflict of interest with a specific project, and maybe other things like that, which are some automatic guidelines that can be applied, or maybe even apply some sort of thing that there's always two tech leads that sign off on a project or whatever, so that it's not just like single people making decisions and whatever else. So if you want, I can give it a go and maybe draft a few points based on what we have in the charter and what we're doing in the workflow, and pass that around for comment, if that makes sense.
Yep, I think that's a great idea. So,
all right.
Thanks everybody for weighing in.
Not to be a pain, but what does that change across the CNCF? Like, the issue is specifically across the TOC. Like, how do we think then we can take those ideas and present them to TOC and say, look, this is what worked for us? Or like, how do we make that work in a larger scale?
The reason why I think it's changing, because we're going to be the first touch point that projects have to join the cloud native landscape, instead of where it used to just be the TOC. So I feel like we do have some influence over the guidelines we're using, by which we should be looking at sandbox projects, for instance, if we're just singling out that, because that's what we're focused on right now. I mean, yes, you're right. In the end, we don't have a vote per se, but we do certainly now have influence on how projects get evaluated and provide a recommendation. So does that make sense, Luis?
Yeah, it makes sense. I just, I hope we
We
sorry.
don't have to. Sorry, Luis. I just wanted to say that we
Sure, go
don't
ahead.
have to look at this as just a storage SIG thing, right? So things like the workflow are a common process, which is going to be adopted by the TOC and all the SIGs, so that everybody adopts the same system. And something like, you know, if we want to put in some specific fairness things and removal of conflicts of interest and stuff like that, we can actually PR those changes into the standard SIG charter as well. So again, we could you know, propose them and get them to be applied to all of the SIGs. So I think, you know, this sort of stuff is cool because we can actually affect change, and we can you know, encourage that change across all of the SIGs. I think most of the SIGs are in a very embryonic state. You know, none of them are sort of at the point where they're so mature that they wouldn't take these sort of suggestions on board.
So after we review the project and give suggestions, TOC will still need to have like 2 sponsors for a project to enter a sandbox, right? So that process is still the same. Just basically we will
It's actually
some
3
suggestions
sponsors
first.
now.
3, oh, yes, okay.
Yeah, so the
For clarity. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so as the TOC grows, following this current selection process, which should complete by the beginning of February, then the number of sandbox sponsors is 3 to sort of match the same TOC ratios. And again,
You just said everything I wanted to say.
yeah, sorry.
Nope, you took care of it. Nope, this is perfect.
And from the TOC presentation that we had a couple of weeks back, I think some of the discussion around that was also in order to maintain fairness, to sort of prevent 2 TOC members, perhaps from the same organization, both agreeing to be sponsors for their own projects and that sort of thing. So I think you know, your concerns are all valid, Luis, but I think we are making some changes to the better, and it's getting better as we go along.
Thank you.
All right. So do we want to move on to the next point?
Yes, thanks. So let's move on.
So the one point which I do actually need the tech lead's help on is the Dragonfly project review. So this unfortunately has slipped through the cracks, and we're on the hook to provide some feedback to the review process. Dragonfly is a sandbox process. If you look at the meeting minutes for December the 11th, Dragonfly is a sandbox project which is moving to incubation. They have presented to the SIG back at the end of August, and we had gone through some feedback, but we hadn't actually provided full feedback to the TOC. I've just gone through and rewatched the YouTube recording of their presentation, and I've written down a few notes which I'm going to share to the PR for the sandbox to incubation PR. But I would greatly appreciate if at least one other tech leads can do the same things, just to make sure it's not just sort of a single SIG member that's providing that feedback, please.
My feedback on that was, I think it's a database, right? So I don't feel too comfortable providing feedback because that's not my area of expertise. I took a quick look at it. Is there somebody else that might be more qualified?
So just for clarification, yeah, Dragonfly is image distribution, and it's sort of focused on container distribution. So effectively think of this as a container repo, and it does the replication and the distribution of those repos. So it's kind of almost in the same bracket as perhaps say Harbor, or Quay or Key, depending on how you pronounce that. But it's obviously got a bit more of a storage element because of the sort of storage replication and the image distribution and that kind of stuff, which is why they asked for our input on it.
Alex, I saw that Quentin actually included that in this new SIG that he's forming, the runtime one. If you look at it, that is actually listed under there.
That's right. So there's kind of joint for this particular thing, for better or for worse. There's like a joint review that needs to happen there.
We were tasked with it because there was no other SIG that could. It wasn't really a storage project per se, right? We got tasked with it because there was nobody else to look at it.
That's right. That was at that time, but after that, this this new SIG got formed after that, I think, because at that time it does not have a SIG. At that time, this runtime SIG was not formed yet. So
okay. Is storage still on the hook?
I think it would be remiss of us to not provide feedback, given that we've been through the presentation and sort of taking down notes, and most of us have commented on that. So if you listen to the video, we all had quite very vociferous feedback, and a lot of the problems that we kind of talked about on that call were actually storage related things and consistency related issues and those sort of things. So that's why I thought it would be useful to give that feedback back to the team, because I'm not sure maybe a runtime team is necessarily going to have all of that background, and they have already presented to us, so we might as well provide the feedback. So if one other person could volunteer, that would be awesome. But at least I'm going to provide my feedback, hopefully tomorrow.
Yeah, technically I know very little about P2P, which is I think the core technology behind Dragonfly, right?
Yeah.
I think at a high level, we didn't. Based on what I remember, I didn't think we found any red flags. So we can only give generic. We don't find anything wrong kind of recommendation, as far as I can tell.
Okay, all right. So I'll put my feedback together, and then if you have time, maybe some of you could look at that. If otherwise, we'll just move forward. The next point we had on the agenda was an update following the meeting we had with Jiang Li, who is the TOC liaison for SIG Storage. There were a few things we discussed around the workflow and things like that, which are all sort of feeding back into the process, which is on the public TOC discussions. And one of the things that Xiang was talking about was looking to get the CNCF to do sponsorship for Jepsen tests for storage projects that are going through graduation. And Chris Aniszczyk said that will be something that should be available in the budgets as well. So that's a piece of good news for future projects that are going to go through that process. I believe Sugu Vitesse went through that Jepsen testing, right?
No, we did not.
Okay.
Because we know that if we went now, we'd get butchered.
Right.
I don't know if you've heard of Kyle. He's pretty,
hardcore.
Yes, yeah. I think the reason why, so what we want to do is the main purpose of Jepsen is to make sure that the claims of the project are not incorrect. And there's not enough documentation in Vitesse that talks about what kind of consistency it gives you and everything. So we have a to-do on our list to make sure that we document what Vitesse can and cannot do. And once that is clarified, we should be ready to go through the test. If you went just now, you'll just say, oh, Vitesse doesn't do this, doesn't do that. It says, yeah, we know that, but it's just not documented yet. So yeah, that's what we're waiting for. Yeah.
um, the other thing that Xiang was discussing with us was, you know, and he wanted, and he suggested that we brainstorm this with the tech leads for the SIG to kind of say, you know, we could actually change the way we operate, and not just have projects come to the CNCF to join the CNCF, but actually the SIGs could start taking an active role to actually identify if there are gaps, and if there are projects that we think would be beneficial to the CNCF, and actually sort of try and reach out to them and talk to them. So he suggested that perhaps we should have a bit of a brainstorm on this, and I wondered what people thought about this.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I know that a lot of different SIGs have put together maybe landscape documents and identify gaps in the landscape to help facilitate, you know, saying, oh, we're missing this type of project, and helping identify it in that sense. I wouldn't be against that.
Yeah. And in fact, you know, part of the sort of brainstorming was, you know, should we actually reach out and, you know, talk to projects like, you know, TIDB or CockroachDB or Ceph, for example, and see if there was any interest in them joining the CNCF, or you know, those were just examples before anybody sort of gets super panicky about it. But you know, are there any like obvious gaps that we can identify, or maybe we need to go away and think about it, and maybe have a bit of a brainstorm in the next meeting?
Yeah, by the way, Cockroach presented before Vitesse to CNCF. And I believe at that time, they were not willing to give up the trademark for Cockroach. I think that was one of the main reasons.
And they adopted a less open
license. And they went, yeah, and
Okay.
later they changed to, they are not, many people don't call them open source anymore at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Same with the, I think, I would have thought of Mongo, but they also went the non-open source route. But TiDB is still a good candidate. And I think they would love to present if we kind of approach them. And I mean, I think they started with TiKV, but I don't know why they didn't think of TiDB.
Well, that's right, because TiKV is already a project.
Yeah.
So it would make sense for TiDB to.
Yeah. I mean, the thing which I find kind of somewhat disturbing is there are so many big vendors, like there's Cassandra, there's all these big database storage systems, and I'm surprised that they are not thinking of becoming cloud native, like make it run well in Kubernetes. So it's, I think there's some lag in them thinking about Kubernetes as an important and viable platform.
Okay. So as a takeaway, is there somebody in the TiDB team that we can talk to maybe? And
yeah.
Is worth doing that?
They are somewhat of our competitors, but we are also friends. So I can reach out to see if we are co-opetitors, whatever.
Co-opetition, yeah.
Yeah, we are in co-opetition. So I can reach out to them, see if I'm sure they'll be very excited to present.
All right. And can I ask that the other tech leads have a bit of a think and see if there are any projects that, you know, we specifically want to reach out to directly, and see if there's interest, and maybe we can pick this up in the next meeting.
Should we look at the existing storage project first and just kind of put them into different buckets and then see what, I mean, look, because we already have a landscape white paper, right? So, and then see where are the gaps where we don't have any projects falling into any category?
Sure. I actually had the slides in the deck that I presented in San Diego, with the list of projects and the buckets they fall into. So I can share that around.
Okay.
That's a good idea. Okay. So moving on, we have the documents that are in progress. I'm sorry to say I haven't had much time to work on the performance doc, but I'm hoping to pick that up again next week and try and drive some updates to that. Suku, I see you've just released an update to the database documents. Do you want to quickly talk through that?
Yes, I have only a few minutes left. So what I have tried to do is, when I tried to factor all the inputs in, I realized that it kind of needed a full rewrite. So essentially, that's what I did.
Right.
And I've added an optional section at the end, but I think it's important to cover what are the viable configurations that you can run databases on today. There's a lot of people who haven't thought about these issues, but these are pretty important if you want to run them. And you can see a wall of text on the side for comments there, which is kind of what I was trying to imply is the problem with running storages, databases in Kubernetes. Anthony and I have talked a little bit about it, which is why I roped him in to giving his point of view. He used to work at the Kubernetes team at Google, and I think he has interacted with the storage team there also a bit. So he's pretty familiar with these problems and issues.
All right.
Yeah. So based on this comment, there is one section I think I should add is basically there's issues around local PV, and the main problem is that so far there is no viable configuration that people have run with using local PV and databases. The ones that I have displayed here are things that I know exist in production, so I can confidently talk about them that these are valid and viable configurations. But it seems like there are some problems and limitations with local PV, and because of that, people are afraid to touch them, and because it's kind of becoming a catch-22, where since there is nobody else running it, nobody wants to be the first one. So we want to actually try it out ourselves at planet scale to see if we can make local PV viable. And if there is this experience that's coming out of that, we can do it. But at this point, I don't know anyone that's using databases using local PV. And it's an important configuration. So if there are limitations there, maybe we can use our experience to give us feedback to Kubernetes and tell them, hey, can you add these features? There's the issue that Anthony talked about, which is about scheduling of pods. Once you assign a local PV, the pod is stuck with it. There's no easy way to migrate it out. And there's also another issue which you told me about, which is it has fixed allocations and it's not very flexible in terms of being able to schedule them. So you have to fix the allocations up front and it's hard to change them is another issue he mentioned. So maybe what I was thinking is say that local PV is a viable thing. As of now, there is no known configuration. So if there are people that want to try it, please let us know and we can basically talk about it.
Can we pull in Michelle Wu into this discussion? She worked a lot on local PV, and I think she's in touch with a number of customers that are actually using it.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, that would be good.
Is this for the landscape? I'm confused. The landscape document?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why are we talking something so specific as the implementation of the deployment? I don't think anything in landscape talks about Kubernetes. It talks about storage as a whole. So I don't think the landscape paper should have anything to do with local PVs. That's an implementation detail.
That's yeah, I didn't think of it that way. I had assumed that landscape was kind of Kubernetes centric.
No, not at all.
Okay.
From my opinion.
Yeah,
It
in
should
that case, I don't know. I think this entire section should not be there at all because it's very Kubernetes specific.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah,
know,
exactly.
Do you know what I'm thinking? Is that this sort of content is a sort of content that could actually be in Luis, in your use
The application
case
stuff.
example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so you
this would
may.
be
So I've
ideal
done
for
work for
that.
the other document instead.
Yeah, for which is a lot more freedom, and we haven't gone back to that and discussed how that will work and the guidelines around that. But
All
I
right,
think in the
feel free
next
to
meeting,
hijack this and put it in your stuff, and then we can iterate on that.
yeah, let's discuss that. I think
Yeah.
probably next meeting.
So
All
in
right.
which case, I think the other part, the previous section that I've reworked, you can review that part, and if you feel that something needs to be added, let me know, and then or add your comments there, and then I can incorporate them.
All right. I'll double check that. I mean, on first glance, it looks fine. I think it would be useful, as I had commented in the past, that maybe we want to talk about some of the storage attributes that we specifically mention in the landscape document. So things like, the different database implementation options can have impacts on performance and consistency and availability and those sort of things. So maybe just kind of mention something along those lines. That would be, I think, useful. But apart from that, I think it looks done.
Cool. So I do see a Kubernetes mention even in the main section, so I should reword that. I don't know.
Honestly, that's probably okay.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Can you?
I'll write a comment in the.
Write comment. Cool. Yeah.
Cool.
So in case I'll make
Yeah.
sure to take care of that. Cool. All right. So I have to drop off now. I have another
All right.
thing to get started on. So so I look forward to the comments, and I'll see you at the next call.
Awesome. Thanks, Hugo.
Well, I just thought about something about the previous topic. I don't think we have any projects in object storage, right? Minium, I believe they presented a long time ago to the storage working group, but then they ended becoming a storage backend supported by Rook. I don't know if they would be interested to be a project under CNCF. So it is supported by Rook, but also they did get presented before. So I just don't know what was their plan, what was the reason that they don't want, they wanted and then don't want it to be.
That's a very good point, actually. I think that is actually a gap. Good
Yeah.
catch.
I agree. And Nuba, which is a fairly new project, might also be a candidate that would be an interesting project that is a gap in the landscape today. But I'd have to talk with them and see if they're interested.
All right.
Object storage, not there's not many projects of those in open source. There's just a few, but it's a handful. So
Yeah. Actually, I think Scality has an open source project now for their object store as well. All right. That's a very good point. Thank you. So, Luis, the use case document.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like we need to jumpstart that again.
Yeah,
it's probably gone to sleep since KubeCon.
that's correct. And I feel that the biggest issue is not with the idea. I think we need to come up with the format. There needs to be agreement first in the format, and then I can go ahead and execute it. But I think we spent almost an hour on what it can and cannot say last
Yeah.
time. So I think we need to all agree on that first before I spend time on it.
Mhm.
So
Do you want, if you have time, do you want you and I to perhaps grab half an hour or an hour sometime over the next week and do a bit of a brainstorm so that we can come prepared for the next meeting and present it?
yeah, I don't mind doing that, but I feel that there was a lot of opinions last time from many people in the meeting. So I just want to make sure that we, like, even if you and I agree, then we present it, then we again spend an hour discussing it. That's my concern.
So I looked at Luis's PR. I think it's actually pretty good, just except that I think the title is very specific for minion. What if you just drop that minion from the title and just and then kind of move that to like a later example section or something?
So we already discussed that and agreed that we weren't going to make it specific, but we were going to talk about categories and sort of buckets of use cases rather than specific things. So I think I think that's right. But I also think that, you know, if we look at some of the things that that Sucre has put together, say for the databases, in terms of, you know, how some of the implementation, which isn't, you know, project specific, it's just general purpose for databases. I think those sort of things are exactly the type of things that could be added into the format or the template. And I think we could, and that's why I'm suggesting maybe we do a really quick brainstorm and
yeah, let's if you want, we can set up a meeting. We can I prefer to leave the meeting open to an invite and saying you can come if you want, and then was a specific topic is just the template, and that's it.
Right. Okay, so why don't you ping out an invite to the mailing list for a time that works for you sometime next week.
That's great.
You know, and then whoever can join, and we'll try and get it sorted.
That sounds perfect.
I apologize for all the coffee.
It's all good. It's winter time.
Well, we only have 3 minutes left. Should we pause there, Alex?
I think so. And I can go and get a glass of water and stop joking.
Thanks all for your input and insight.
All right.
Appreciated.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.